Hey everyone, and welcome to the Instructor Community Call for September 2023. My name, as always, is Kyle Rosenthal. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, as well as an account executive here at Skillable. And I welcome you, whether you're joining us live, as a few people have, or if you are joining us with the recording. If you want to get onto the socials, if you're listening to us as part of the post recording, or alternatively, if you're here joining us live, post on social media, that you're attending. Our social media accounts are there, so Twitter at Skillable, LinkedIn Skillable, Facebook Skillable, and just for something different, Instagram is Skillable Labs is where we are. So feel free to post something into there. We do generally have some prizes, not today, but not that we'll give out today, but we do have prizes, and that's the thing that we'll contact us, randomly for people that have tagged us in things on social media and that sort of thing. So always do it. It's always a good thing to do. Today's agenda. Our usual sort of roundup of the topics that we do. So we do have, our normal sort of welcome, which is where we're in here. We'll have an update on some of our Microsoft certified courses. And then we're going to roll into a fireside chat with Glenn Morris about AI. Now, we've had Glenn on before when we've talked about dynamics in the past. Dynamics or BI? No, we talked about BI last time we had. Glenn is just full of knowledge, so therefore it's always good to have him in. Today, we're going to be having a chat with him about AI, and in particular, how you can get ready for using that or presenting that within the classroom, and some of the things that some of the ways that you can actually get yourself knowledgeable about, not necessarily all the AI, because it all keeps on changing, but certainly, being able to have that intelligent sort of conversation. We'll then have the roundup of our instructor offers, and then hopefully we'll have some time left over at the end where we have a bit of a conversation, and we'll look for some of our resources, and that's something that you have access to as instructors as well. All right, so just with some of the recently published mock courses, so these are the ones that have recently come on board. Those are all, like sort of, or some of them are newish type ones. So the AI one in particular, pretty new one of our courses. Just bear in mind with that one that there is some pre-requirements for that. So you do need to go and have an open AI account to start off with. There are some instructions in the setup. So if you are running that course, you do need to have your students know to be able to go on and create an account. In addition to that, as the instructor, you also need to make sure that you've applied for your Open AI account. Available for MCTs. It is run through Microsoft. You need to do your you basically just need to fill out the form, and it comes back pretty quickly. The other thing of note is the MD102, which is the replacement for the MD100. MD100 is retiring at the end of this month, so at the end of September. So you won't be able to schedule it past then. Instead, Microsoft are encouraging you to start using MD102 in its place. Don't forget that as MCTs, if you have a Microsoft certified, if you're a Microsoft certified trainer with a learning action pack, then you also can go on and purchase labs through the marketplace, so marketplace.skillable.com. So if you are an independent trainer who has learning action pack, you can, and you want to run your own courses, and that's something you can certainly do that. You need to sign up through the marketplace.skillable.com. If you're a part of a training organization, then you have that same option as well. So that's the replacement for the old Avato marketplace. It's well and truly on board now, and it's a pretty seamless way to be able to get to do your lab purchases and that sort of thing. So marketplace.skillable.com for that Microsoft marketplace. Right, so that's our little sort of a roundup of the Microsoft updates, and now we get right into Glenn. Glenn, welcome. As Glenn scrambles for the mute button. No, you're still on mute.
Yes, thank you very much. I finally worked that out.
It's the traditional handshake, right? Like in online calls, it's like, oh no, I can't see you. Yes, you're on mute. I'm on mute. I can't hear, and then eventually we'll work it out.
But the strange thing about that, and we're talking about AI, it's kind of one of those things that from a human perspective hasn't resonated, right? We've been making the same mistake for, well, since COVID, essentially, with the mute button. It just doesn't kind of connect with us that we should check whether we're heard before we speak.
Like, is it the human nature relies on that a little bit of interaction, which is can you tell me whether you can hear me or not? Maybe it's also that human connection where we desire someone else to actually acknowledge that we exist.
Potentially. I just don't think that you start off your life being able to sort of say things and people hear you and respond. So you kind of now go, why should I have to select a button in order to get people to respond?
Right. Yep.
Or in my case, not respond.
All right. Well, so Glenn, for those that haven't been in any of the sessions that we've had you in before, can you just give us just a brief introduction of yourself? And I say brief.
Yeah, I'm basically a maths grad with a fair interest in applied mathematics, who sort of played mostly in the programming in what was once upon a time called business intelligence space. And then when the AI pieces started to appear on the Microsoft platform in around 2014, which is a fair while ago now, I immediately sort of joined a lot of the Microsoft groups, the Data Engineering Council and things like that, and sort of ran with it. And now almost entirely my day is made up playing with data, working out ways that we can make systems more intelligent. Obviously, ChatGPT and large language models have come along, and that seems to be on everybody's lips. But the reality is that, within the business world, they're still interested in being able to, identify the green bottle from the blue bottle, or work out how many people are walking into the building and things like that. So while we always talk about AI, well, I say always, more recently we talk about AI from a large language model perspective. There are a lot of sort of facets that have to be considered when you are considering AI as something you should instruct or teach or, speak on. From a professional point of view, obviously I've got a company called Talisman, and I've got a couple of customers, but primarily the last 6 months or so I've been in commercial loans, which I'm finding really, really interesting. The kind of things that banks and lending companies, payment gateways and things like that are doing from a technology perspective and also from an AI perspective is amazing. So that's me. And then I play MCT wherever I can. I love training, so I do try and train as often as I can.
And you're still an MCT regional lead?
Yes, yep. I believe I am.
for Australia. So the other thing that with Glenn is Glenn and I live about on a good day about 45 minutes drive away from each other. We never see each other in our own country, so we avoid each other unless we're traveling, is essentially how it seems to be. So
yeah.
So Glenn, I guess a couple of things that I wanted to have a chat with you about today around that sort of the AI, like around AI and that thing, and I realize that it's such a large subject that, like, how does like a trainer try and sort of get their head around the sort of things so they can have that that intelligent conversation with student, not necessarily, and it may not necessarily be something that might be getting ready to do an AI course, but it also just might be in general, because obviously it is the word of the week, right? Like it's the
Sure.
it's on everyone's lips. So what's the sort of things that we can do as trainers to kind of to wrap our head around it, like to have that conversations?
So the first time, or the last time you had me on for a fireside chat, one of the things that we unpacked or we talked about was this notion of AI and the way that the big vendors have more or less pushed AI as if it's a product, as if AI is the actual product.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always sort of talk to people about when, I've got a couple of people that I mentor. I joined a group where you can sort of not grab a few kids, that isn't the way to put it, but where you can sort of help a few kids out by sort of trying to give them direction and things like that. And one of the things that we always talk about is, obviously in the last 6 months or so, everyone wants to be in AI. So the first thing I believe that you need to do is make a decision or find a stream within this umbrella called AI that you feel you will be comfortable with. It's not possible to just be good at AI. Within AI, you've got sort of computer vision, machine learning, and a whole heap of other capabilities that have to be considered. And I know that, and this is where it becomes confusing, because at the moment, AI is, open AI, large language models, generative AI, chat GPT, that sort of thing. And we've kind of completely forgotten that there are still companies out there trying to predict what their sales will be next month. And there's still companies out there trying to do the day-to-day things, sort of ingest information from a PDF, from a hard copy of a document into a database. So there's a lot of the typical AI stuff that we were doing pre-Chat GPT has kind of dissipated in favor of large language models. Well, it's dissipated in the eyes of the public who are not working in AI. So I think that the first important component is to sort of look at AI and say to yourself, are large language models something I would be interested in? Look at them, break them down. I guess I always encourage people to look at the mathematics of it to sort of just get a really good understanding of what it takes to build a large language model, what it takes to do what essentially is called deep learning, which is essentially where large language models sit. And then say to yourself, is this something that I'm comfortable with? Is it something that I can do? And if it isn't, then I'm not saying you don't want to go down that pathway, but it shouldn't be your primary pathway. You might want to then look at computer vision, for instance, or you might want to then look at text analytics, or one of the other streams that you could potentially get into. I don't think it's really possible to be an expert in AI, as in everything AI. But I think it's possible to have a primary stream and have knowledge about the other pieces. And that, from the trainer perspective, is one of the things that I struggle with. You have courses like AI 102, which just, it starts with computer vision, then it goes to custom vision, then it goes to text analytics, then we're building chatbots, then we're doing this, then we're doing that, which is a great overview of AI subject matter and all the things that sit underneath that umbrella. But again, from a trainer's perspective, it's really difficult to be good at every single module in the course. From a background perspective, if you're bringing field knowledge to the course, you're only really going to bring field knowledge about potentially one or two of the modules.
Right.
And the others, you're really just going to be one slide ahead, as they typically say. So I think finding your sweet spot with AI is always a good start. And I do sort of commend certainly Microsoft for taking the generative piece and creating a course separately.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like they have to do that with all these sort of streams within AI, rather than, and there are, I mean, I know that this has been done because of popularity, but it should be a case of, rather than just simply having this course that says, here's 1,000 things you can work with, we should have generative AI as per the course that they've developed, the 050, vision, text, and so on and so forth, deep learning, and essentially have these 4 or 5 streams within which we put a lot of the AI tooling, rather than just kind of dumping everything into this bucket that we call AI.
Yeah.
And just on the AI 050, while I'm thinking about it, what they want you to do is obviously request permission to use the OpenAI service on Azure. You've got to try and make sure that, for the ease of getting this all set up as quickly as possible, you need to try and have a business email address and a business reason for using it. So the form that you fill in, Microsoft is essentially looking, obviously, for corporations and enterprises that want to use OpenAI. I'm not saying that you can't do it as an individual, just takes that little bit longer as an individual. I tried to apply initially when it first popped as an individual, and I went back and forth, and they would, what's your use case and things like that. And then I applied using Talisman, and basically said I'm a business, and a few days later,
right,
I had everything set up. So so yeah, for the guys on the call, just the form that you're going to be filling in seems to favor
right,
businesses over individuals. Yeah.
Okay, good to know. So yeah, so make sure for that you do leave it's not something you're going to do last minute.
Mm-hmm.
So did you? I know we discussed previously, but I actually forgot to ask you yesterday. Do you have a model ready to go that you were going to show us for today? Like some, I think you were.
Oh, it wasn't. It wasn't so much a model. It was more a case of, and let me just fire it up.
Yep.
So it was more a case of that overall understanding that once you're in the Azure portal, and once you're sort of working with all the different tooling, Microsoft has now essentially got to a place where everything is connected. So let me just, now that I'm in Azure, let me very quickly share my screen.
Yep.
And you should be able to see the screen now.
Yep.
So with all of the pieces with regard to Azure and training, and certainly from a Microsoft perspective, you've obviously within Azure got all of the cognitive services capabilities. Now, I say cognitive services because they're still calling it cognitive services, certainly in my part of the world. So you can pretty much see it's still called cognitive services here, but if I go to this particular environment and I hit create, I think you can see it now has the new naming up at the top. So still a little bit confusing in within Azure. But the one thing I would say, when you're sort of getting ready, or when you're thinking about what you should be doing in the AI space, cognitive services is a good place to start. Obviously, it aligns with the 102 course as well. And you can pretty much see here, you can start to then sort of look at some of the options: vision, language, search, speech, and say to yourself, which am I most interested in? And start to have a look at some of these pieces. The other obvious set of capabilities that you want to be looking at is Azure Machine Learning. Now, Azure Machine Learning has changed quite significantly over the last month or two. They've introduced a model catalog. So as you can pretty much see, we've got Azure OpenAI language models, we've got vision models, we've got Meta's Llama, and then loads and loads of models that Microsoft have made available, some of the Hugging Face models. And over on this side as well.
Did you say that Hugging Face models?
Oh, yeah. Hugging Face is a sort of a model provider. It's one of those first places that became an aggregator of people's work in the AI space. Okay. So if you created, for instance, a computer vision model and you wanted other people to be able to use it, or you created an example of something happening, as in ingesting data, running it through a model and spitting out some scoring or predictions or something like that, you could essentially publish your model to Hugging Face. So let me go there and very quickly show you what I mean. Hugging Show. Hugging Face essentially became this initial community where you could publish your models. Right now, when I say publish your models, this is people's work, but you can see it's a case of people's work along with Meta's Llama model, Microsoft's Microsoft's models, and you'll see various other OpenAI's Whisper. So you'll see loads and loads of different options. Now, what Microsoft has done is essentially gone in and said, well, if there's anything really good here in the object detection space, for instance, let's pull it into our model catalog within Azure Machine Learning Studio. So now you can essentially use that particular model in your solution within Machine Learning Studio.
So is it kind of like a GitHub repository for like AI type content? Is that like that's a way to kind of picture it? Or?
Yeah, it's kind of similar. I wouldn't say it is. It's more of a community driven thing than it is based on the sort of GitHub model.
Okay.
You know, so they'll let you get access to models, data sets. You can have what they call sort of spaces where, you know, we have all these running apps and things like that you can test and try, and with documentation, full solutions, and then there is a pricing model as well that comes with it.
Is there like because I know, say for instance, with some repositories and something in the past, like which might have scripts and that sort of thing in there, that as an MCT, one of the things I've always suggested is when you're bringing something in like that, if it's not a script or something that you know inside out, or you don't know the person who's actually published it, to make sure that you're reviewing it to see if there's anything that might be potentially malicious within it. Is there any chance of that being within here as well? Is that a thought that someone might need to use before they start using something that's in that sort of repository, or no?
The answer is potentially. I think what Hugging Face has done over the past couple of years is they've commercialized things, and they put a pricing set in place, and as a result, I think they are way more diligent about exactly what's on the what's in the various repositories and what's being stored and how the models work and things like that. In many cases, though, with these models, you can grab one and pretty much go and have a look at what it does, how it works, and things like that. So generally, it's going to be running on the local compute, wherever that may be in the world. And so you can try these things out. You can kind of see how they work. You'll see that some will require logins. So I would pick one that does.
Yeah.
But generally, if you're working with pretty much anything, really. Actually, let me go to something that is a little object detection or something like that. So, in many cases, you can pretty much see, you can kind of test out a few examples. They give you really good descriptions. They give you insight into the code, how it's made up, who developed it, how we got to this particular point, the various authors and things like that. So you also need to look at this if you're serious about using one of these models. You also need to look at this from if I see anything, or if I feel like there's anything malicious, or if I do want to double check, the very people who develop the model and things like that are accessible. It doesn't mean immediately accessible, but you can, in many cases, go through the code, talk to the people who developed the code, talk to the community generally, because as you can pretty much see, this model's been downloaded 12,000 times.
Yeah.
So, within the community, you're going to find that, people are going to leave comments and stuff. Like, for instance, in this case, somebody doesn't seem to be able to train this particular model. And then they're also calling out the code where they're having an issue and so on. So I think it becomes one of those things, do your due diligence, do your research before you absolutely go out and, grab a model and start using it.
Okay.
I guess as you would do if you were using, Microsoft or any vendor for that particular.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask that question if it was like, great. Thank you.
Yeah, so Microsoft have added all of this capability. So a lot of those sort of pieces that were only available in certain places are now available within the Microsoft catalog inside of their machine learning studio.
Mm-hmm.
Down on this right-hand side are, this is always a good example for me, and I show this off in the classroom when I say to people, from a things you think you would like to do.
Yeah.
If you looked at what's available here, you can pretty much see that it's not always just about ChatGPT.
No.
Companies are still classifying text. Companies are still, building translation and summarization models, classifying images, segmenting images, detecting objects. All these things are still happening on a day-to-day basis. And to be frank with you, they're probably happening on a much larger scale than ChatGPT is in the corporate world. There's a lot, as awesome as it is, there is a lot of reservation about just plugging in this kind of public language model into corporate environments. And we've seen a few, cases where companies have done that and then suddenly realized that everything that you're typing into this model is being ingested and will likely be used for the next training iteration. So there has to be an element of caution, which brings you then to, the pieces around, developing your own using notebooks or automated machine learning, or using Designer. And then Microsoft's new generative prompting tool, which is called PromptFlow, which allows you to essentially build out your language models if you want to, in a visual way, and if you're happy to write some code in a not so visual way. So it allows you to add large language models, prompts, code if you want to write code. It lets you capture outputs, things like that. So there's lots of cool capability that you can use here. And then in addition to all of that, there's obviously the OpenAI component. And this, from my perspective, is one of those things that changes the way we view ChatGPT and the large language models, because when you head into this particular environment, you have the ability, as you can see, to sort of start in what Azure call their Azure AI Studio, if it were to load. And you can pretty much see that it gives you the ability to work with chat, with completions, with DALL-E, the image generation model, and then obviously a few things that are similar to machine learning, your deployments, your models, your data files, and things like that. The cool thing with chat is you can now start to bring your own data. So now we're essentially sort of moving away from that, let's use ChatGPT, to let's use our own data. So right. I'm in the process actually of building one of these models with the company that I'm working with, excuse me, own data. So we're taking all of their support data, we're taking all of their knowledge-based data, all of their documentation, uploading it, getting it indexed and searched, and adding what we call skills to the data, and then making and essentially building our own large language model using the corporate data in order for support and just generally people within the company to be able to get information from the documentation by simply asking it a question, because ultimately it's using behind the scenes the open AI model to train, but on your data.
Right. So you've still got the ability to be able to ask questions in a simple language, but the data that's actually looking at is your data, rather than it being like, whatever the back end for ChatGPT is, like, or that style of thing. So essentially you've got you're doing that simple language, but so in that case though, because it's then looking at your data, the data that it's actually pulling out will have whatever your company's unique language is around it, is what's going to be contained within there as well.
Mm-hmm. So it's using the company data, but it's using the OpenAI model. So it's the way it's trained is then trained on your data. And then that you can essentially have these, what they call system messages. So I then divide all of that information, because in our case, it's a lot of information. It's, it's the lending space. So we've got information from ASIC, the Australian Securities and Investments Commission. We've got obviously our documentation. We've got all our support documentation. But what we then do is we create a couple of essentially chatbots.
Yeah.
And we put in place what are called system messages, where you essentially, you can see this one says you're an AI assistant that helps people find information. But I might say you are the company's legal representation. So when you're searching this model, the way that you search should be from a legal standpoint.
Gotcha.
And as a result, when that particular person were to query, they just need to say, can you find me anything on, medium amount credit contracts or something like that? It will go and do that, but it will do it from a legal standpoint.
Right. So rather than coming back and giving it in like necessarily plain language, it would give it in the legalese, or give you some of the legal statements that might be around it, and that sort of thing.
Sure. And you could, with the system message, you could basically say, if you do give me any legal information, make sure that there is evidence and discovery and all that kind of stuff before you present me with the information. So you give it all these instructions, and you tell it, that when I need information, it needs to look like this. When support needs information, it needs to be in a manner where I can follow instructions so that I can solve somebody's problem, and things like that. So
perfect.
There's a lot of really cool stuff. But once again, you can kind of see how we've drifted to large language models and ChatGPT.
Right. Yeah. No,
in the conversation, because it seems to be the one that's obviously popular, but also most recognizable and seems easiest in the context of AI. But the reality is that while we might be using a little bit of chat, and well, not at the moment, but within the next sort of 3 weeks to a month, we might have all of this set up. We're still, using object character recognition on about probably, anywhere between 50 and 100 contracts every day. We're still using computer vision internally in some parts of the building. We are still essentially forecasting. We have anomaly detection in play for some of our internal systems and things like that. So most of the sort of 5 capabilities that I've just talked about, there are 4 that are running constantly. And there is essentially this one that is only used 10 or 20 times probably by the legal team, maybe a little bit more by the support team and things like that. So, it takes us full circle and back to that. If you are, looking at training in the AI space, don't try and go in and sort of know everything, but pick your poison as such, and start working with that. And if it is generative AI and large language models, then so be it, because there's definitely going to be a need. I mean, the sort of, I know everyone talks around prompt engineering and things like that, and there will definitely be a need for I kind of don't really like the term prompt engineer, but there will be a need for prompt engineers.
Right.
And there will be a real need for people who can manipulate large language models in order to give us the kind of information that we require. I just don't know if that is going to be something that, will be easy to teach. And I don't know if people who are getting into the sort of large language model space realize how complex prompt engineering is. I mean, it's right. I know that we see it as you just have to give the model clear instructions. It goes way beyond clear instructions. I mean, there essentially are languages, like programming languages, that we use with prompt engineering. There's a language called Jinja, as in Jinja, that we pretty much use. Now, I know that it's a declarative language. It looks like JSON, or kind of mixture between JSON and XML. But under the hood, that's typically what we use to sort of manipulate the model. Yeah. So that the answers that we get and the guidance that we get, aligns with what we're trying to achieve. Yeah. Because most people, are just sort of, tell me about this, is their prompt. Yeah. And then a lot of stuff you'll see on the internet is, tell me about this, but also saying, listen, I have no previous knowledge, so can you tell me about it, as if you're explaining it to a 12-year-old? Yeah. And things like that. But, prompt engineering goes, I guess, way beyond that. The whole theory behind fine-tuning, adapting your model to a particular task or set of tasks is really difficult to do. And then, things like zero-shot learning, one-shot learning, few-shot learning are all concepts that you have to understand and then apply, right, in order to be able to do these things. And obviously, if you can apply them in a somewhat programmatic way, it makes it so much easier. So the notion of, how all of this is put together is, really interesting as well. And again, it becomes a stream. And to be frank, it's likely that we'll see multiple streams within the generative space, right? So there'll be the prompt engineers, but there'll probably be other sides to that particular component. I know that, you know, nowadays you're seeing a few apps out there where you can upload documents and then interact with the documents in a sort of natural language. So there'll be that component that will be required in the future as well. Now, I know, you know, certainly a company like the one I'm working for is reluctant to just upload their documentation into a service.
Right. Yeah.
So probably going to try and build something like that for ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, in the future.
I would also guess. Sorry, Glenn. I'm going to have to wrap you up because we're starting to get up against time.
Yep.
But I also would suggest that as we start progressing more, and you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong within here, that we're going to have some more governance built around it as well, for things like how to deal with that data, like sort of that data which is then more generative data, whether it be the AI, like, you know, the large language models, but it's also the like that more day-to-day type content as well, like the OCR content and that sort of thing, like sort of how that data is then dealt with, where it's stored, what can be used around that content and how far it goes, because a lot of that content, as it starts being used, could be used for one model, but then being used as a learning part for another model, as you kind of pointed out. So therefore, it's like that's another discussion to have around.
Yeah, completely different can of worms. We haven't got to the data piece.
No.
Which is usually where we start.
All right. Well, as I said, we'd have to wrap up because we're right up against time. But Glenn, I really appreciate having a conversation with you. I always walk away a little bit more knowledgeable, a little bit more confused, and a little bit more depressed. And I think that's a great way to start the day, as it is here in Australia. But thank you very much.
I think that you know, just as I wave you goodbye, I think for the guys on the call and for anyone who listens to it, you know, find your place in AI. It's not a we can do everything set of subject matter. It's find your place, find a primary stream. It could even be the data piece, and you know, all the other pieces will fit into place. They'll become sort of your generalized knowledge, but you know, find a kind of stream within AI that you're comfortable with, that you can be good at, and then run with it.
Right. Perfect. So yeah, so the generalist knowledge kind of disappears now, or you might have generalist knowledge to start with, and then have that narrowed view for what your specialization is. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, Glenn. Do appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So we will. I will likely have Glenn on again at some point in the future for other subjects that he is very knowledgeable on as well. So we'll make sure we get him back. Just as a excuse me, as my voice goes. Just a reminder for some of the instructor offers that we have on. If you do go to skillable.com/offers. That's where you can get access to sign up for the mock lab access, which is for our for the Microsoft official courseware. Get access to all of the courses, all the labs that we host, as well as the MCT All Access Pass. Now that is the access pass for our challenge labs. And then we've also got another offer along those same lines if you are an AWS instructor as well. So skillable.com/offers is your home to be able to go through into there. As well as, just bear in mind as well, we do have our instructor recognition. That includes the badging that we put through, the badging for classes as well as students that you know, and so we'll give you some rewards and that sort of thing, whether they're LinkedIn, Credly badges, which you can then publish out And we also do other recognition for larger numbers as well as you start going through. Ordinarily, we would have a little bit of time for conversation and questions, that sort of thing within here. Today, unfortunately, as always happens with Glenn, we've run out of time. So just some of the resources to put through. If you do have any questions or anything like that, though, if there's things that you want to have a chat about, then please join into the instructor channel on Slack. We do have a feedback channel, a feedback page. So if you go to feedback.skillable.com, if there's anything that you have for the team to be, like, if there's things you think, I should improve that, maybe this is a great thing to do. We do have those resources for you to be able to get access to be able to give us that information. As you would know from last session, what that process does, what happens with that feedback once you give it to us. So, like, it doesn't go into the nebulous black hole. If you missed last month's session, make sure you go back and have a listen to it. Eric gave us a really good insight as to what happens with that feedback, and I really appreciate that, and kind of gave me a much better idea about, like, I see, what happens when you say, I really think we should do this. Where does that go? So do jump into that, and then of course all of our socials. So if you want to jump onto that, right. Well, thank you very much for joining us for September. We do have, obviously we'll be back next month. If say for instance, as we're going through any of these, if there's things that you go, hey, it would be great if I knew a little bit more about whatever, feel free to reach out and let us know what topics you'd like covered within here. So, I go out and I grab people that I think would be interesting, and topics that I think would be things that as an instructor I would want to know about. But yeah, if there's things that you think, is there something else? Then please feel free to let us know, and I'll do my best to go and reach out and find someone who can come in and answer some of those questions. Apart from that, thank you very much. Have a great day, a great evening, a great whatever it might be in your part of the world, or when you listen to this recording, and we'll see you next month.